Hello, my name is Flynn, and I'm doing my DES-105 presentation for my game, imaginatively called Ball Game. What is the game? Well, the game is a top-down shooter where you must shoot infinitely spawning enemies. The trick, however, is that your bullets lock and track the nearest enemy, which means you don't necessarily aim, which creates some difficulty with movement and shooting, because the enemy closest to you is not necessarily always the one that's putting you in the most danger, and you can't just kind of spam the shoot button, as there's a slight delay on the firing. Um, Another aspect of it is that enemies will always be able to tell where you are as they track the player in a similar way that the bullets track, and I'll discuss that a little bit later. Um, but the enemies will always be tell where you as the player are. However, you, with the camera placement and size, have a very small field of vision, so it's easy to be snuck up on, and uh, for the enemies to hoard up, which is a difficult thing to deal with the tracking bullets. And also, sorry for the Google Slides for glitching out, I don't know how to fix it. How to play the game. The controls are incredibly simple. Use the arrow keys to move around and use left shift to shoot. I guess you also use the mouse to click start or quit, but I didn't know if that was something you needed to put down, but I guess I've said it. Raycasting. This is probably the thing that is most difficult that I learned, and the most interesting piece of coding that I learned for this project. It sounds cool, at least. So when I had to get the homing bullets to work, I originally tried just doing it as the enemies did. It didn't work very well, and so I had to find something else, in which I had to raycast. So this puts out a circle that collides with every game object. It checks if the game object has the tag enemy. If it finds all those tags, it puts them into an array or a list, and then finds which one is closest, and then fires a bullet that tracks in the same way that the enemies track the player, by finding the point between the two, using like time delta and LARP speed. Calling a game object through a script for most of the game, as I think most people did, used Unity's editing feature of being able to drag a game object if it's being used in a script, or grab a script if it's used by a game object. But I ran into the problem that I couldn't do that because the bullets didn't exist until the program started. And so when the program started and it didn't exist, it couldn't call it. So I had to, instantiate it within the confines of the script, and call it through some code using learning. This allowed me to learn how to call something through scripts, and how like the layering of calling like a game object, and then you call the game object and then the script, and you have to do it in that order. Yeah. Spawning enemies. I use the Y coordinate and the X coordinate for the four borders to set a boundary for enemies to spawn in, and I set it so they spawn every few seconds. This is the function that's used for that. It's pretty simple, but I call the spawn function in update, and I do that so it does check every frame. However, it doesn't summon every frame. It summons every 2 seconds, I believe, so that the enemies didn't get too many too quickly. Making the camera follow the player. Originally I thought this was going to be super simple and wouldn't have to do any coding, because you can just drag the camera, make it a child of the player, and the camera will follow around the player. However, my character occasionally rotates when shooting, and this would rotate the camera as well, creating quite this nauseating spinning effect, which wasn't very good. So I fixed this by using a script and using very similar ideas that I learned with the bullet tracking and the enemy tracking to have the camera follow the player, but instead of calling it when needed with the bullets, it's called in the update. But I did it in late update, so that it would happen a bit after the update of all the other things going on, because the camera was camera didn't need to be in the update sequence, so it was a way of keeping lag down and processing down, just as a thing for the future, even though this game wasn't very intensive. And I had to make it a different Z level, or it would clip through these sprites and they would disappear. Sending player back to the main menu upon death. When the player collides with a network, or more accurately, when an enemy collides with a player, it checks for the player tag, and when it collides, and it is with something with the tag player, it will send you back to the main menu. So if that was me trying a bit of scene management out of the kind of the UI section, where it's a bit easier because it's kind of drag and drop and click a couple boxes. Some things I would improve. The biggest changes, I would add more detailed and interesting sprites, as they're currently just shapes, and a better background so you could tell when you were moving, because if an enemy's or bullets aren't on screen, it's hard to tell if you're really moving with a matte color background. Next, I would add a timer or point system so there's a reason to play and a sense of progression. And finally, I would make tracking of bullets and enemies more fluid, as using time delta and LARP speed and stuff like that. It kind of finds a point in the middle rather than tracking the actual object, which means it slows down the closer it gets to the target and speeds up the further away it is, which is interesting with the bullets, but overall I think I would improve it if I did the project more or redid it. And that is my ball game. Thank you for watching.